15 Golden Age celebrities with the most scandalous secret lives. What if the Hollywood you worshipped was a beautiful lie? Which golden icons hid the darkest rooms behind their brightest smiles? Who paid publicists to polish halos while the truth screamed to be heard? Tonight, we crack the facade. We ask the questions no one dared. Which beloved stars were nightmares on set? Which legends ran double lives after the cameras cut? Which secrets were buried so deep that even co-stars stayed silent? If the image was perfect, what was the price? Keep watching, because once you hear these stories, you'll never see your favorites the same way again. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford on screen was all strength and determination. She played survivors who never gave up. She worked harder than anyone else and made it look glamorous. But in 1978, her adopted daughter Christina published a book called Mommy Dearest that told a completely different story. Christina described growing up in Crawford's house as living in fear. She wrote about humiliations, punishments, and terrifying rages. The most famous image from the book was wire hangers. Crawford supposedly beat her with them in fits of fury. Some people said Christina was lying to make money. Other family members disputed parts of the story. But the damage was done. That perfect public image Crawford had worked so hard to build, the charity events, the beautiful photographs, the perfect home, suddenly looked like a carefully constructed mask. Christina claimed all of that was hiding a mother who ruled through fear and violence. Even people who don't fully believe the book admit one thing: Crawford controlled her image completely and obsessively. She managed every detail of how the public saw her. So we're left with this unresolved question. Which Joan Crawford was real? The glamorous star or the allegedly abusive mother? We'll probably never know for certain. Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock was called a genius. His movies are still studied and celebrated today. But actress Tippi Hedren, who starred in The Birds and Marnie, later told a much darker story about working with him. According to Hedren, Hitchcock became obsessed with her and turned that obsession into control. She said he trapped her with her contract, watched her constantly, and punished her professionally when she refused his advances. He never publicly responded to these allegations in detail, and some people who worked with him still argue about whether it happened or how bad it was. But the pattern Hedren described, a powerful director using the studio system to control and dominate a young actress, has become an important example of how Hollywood power gets abused. To audiences, Hitchcock's films were perfectly crafted masterpieces, but Hedren says that behind the scenes, he was choreographing something else entirely. Who could look at her? Who could speak to her? Essentially, who owned her career? The shocking part isn't just what allegedly happened. It's how long the movie industry protected his reputation and kept the myth of the brilliant gentleman director alive while someone was suffering. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle. Before everything fell apart, Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle was one of the biggest stars in silent films. He was a brilliant physical comedian and helped launch the careers of people like Buster Keaton. Then, in 1921, something happened at a party in a hotel suite. A young woman died, and Arbuckle was accused of causing her death. The newspapers went crazy with sensational headlines. There were 3 trials. In the end, Arbuckle was acquitted, found not guilty. The jury even issued an unprecedented apology to him, saying he'd been wronged. But none of that mattered. The public had already decided he was guilty. The studios dropped him immediately. Theaters refused to show his movies. In Hollywood, where careers get reinvented all the time, Arbuckle became the exception, a man legally proven innocent who still couldn't work under his own name. The personal tragedy was devastating, but it also revealed something about how the industry worked. Moral panic could destroy a career faster than any trial. The studio fixers and censors weren't interested in truth. They were interested in protecting business. Arbuckle died young, his reputation never fully restored, a cautionary tale about how quickly Hollywood can erase you. Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes bought everything: airlines, hotels, movie studios, real estate. He also tried to buy people. Young actresses would get screen tests and contract offers. Hughes would set them up in apartments with strict rules. Phone calls went through his handlers. Former girlfriends later described elaborate systems of control. Curfews, surprise checks on their behavior, layers of secrecy that made it nearly impossible to escape or even confront him about what was happening. Everything was documented: memos, contract clauses, detailed instructions. He treated relationships like business transactions. Some people defend Hughes as a damaged person, a recluse struggling with mental illness and compulsions he couldn't control. Others point out how often we excuse wealthy men's controlling behavior by calling it eccentric. The public loved the story of the shy, brilliant genius who dated the most beautiful women in Hollywood. What they didn't see was the machinery behind it: the paperwork, the surveillance, the systems of possession. Romance wasn't romance, it was management. Intimacy wasn't intimate, it was a corporate acquisition. The apartments weren't gifts, they were monitoring stations. Hughes had the money and power to turn human relationships into something he could own and control, and he did exactly that. Spade Cooley. Spade Cooley was the king of Western swing. On television, he was all smiles and rhinestones, leading his band and making people happy. Audiences loved him. Then, in 1961, the mask came off in the most horrible way possible. Cooley was convicted of murdering his wife, Ella May. It wasn't quick or accidental. It was a vicious, prolonged attack that their teenage daughter witnessed. No amount of publicity magic could fix this. No studio could spin it into something acceptable. The case destroyed Hollywood's favorite excuse: that fame is just an act, something performers put on for work and take off at home. For Cooley, home was literally the crime scene. The man who made America dance and smile had murdered his wife in front of their child. His celebrity didn't excuse him or protect him. It made the crime even more shocking. Here was someone the public had invited into their living rooms through their TV screens, and he turned out to be capable of horrific violence. The rhinestone suits and cheerful music became artifacts of something sinister. Cooley's story stands as one of Hollywood's darkest secrets because it was impossible to hide or reframe. Robert Mitchum. Robert Mitchum had this effortless cool about him: the cigarette, the half smile, the attitude that said he didn't care what anyone thought. Then, in 1948, he got arrested for marijuana possession. The photographs of him in a Los Angeles jail cell hit the newspapers. He actually served time behind bars. For most actors, that would have been the end. A scandal like that could kill a career permanently. But Mitchum did something unexpected. He just rolled with it. He leaned into the bad boy image and turned the scandal into part of his appeal. When he got out, he went back to work like nothing had happened. The thing is, this revealed something important about how power works in Hollywood. The system punished Mitchum, he went to jail, but it didn't exile him or destroy him. For lesser-known actors, a mugshot meant career death. For Mitchum, it became another cool photograph, another layer to his mystique. The public liked his persona enough to forgive him. It showed that if you were popular enough, if your image was strong enough, you could survive things that would bury other people. The rules weren't the same for everyone. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton had the kind of beauty that made casting directors sit up and take notice. She was stunning, talented, and heading straight for stardom. Then, everything fell apart. It started with a love triangle between actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal. The rivalry turned violent. There was an actual fistfight that made headlines everywhere. After that, Payton's life became a slow-motion disaster. Bad relationships, worse publicity, and addictions that grabbed hold of her and wouldn't let go. The same Hollywood system that had built her up just stepped back and watched her fall. She ended up broke and desperate, living on the streets. Her story gets told two ways. One version makes her a cautionary tale about a woman who made bad choices. The other version is harder to hear. It's about an industry that knew exactly how to create stars, and also knew how to stand by and watch them destroy themselves. They'd use you up, then turn away. Payton's tragedy wasn't just personal failure, it was abandonment. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman was Hollywood royalty. She'd starred in Casablanca and represented everything pure and virtuous on screen. America loved her. Then she fell in love with Italian director Roberto Rossellini, got pregnant while still married to someone else, and the country turned on her viciously. Senators actually stood up in Congress to condemn her. Theaters refused to show her movies. The anger was intense and personal, like she'd betrayed every family in America. Here's the ugly part. Male actors had affairs all the time, and the studios just covered it up with clever PR. Nobody got blacklisted, but Bergman, who was serious, independent, and refused to lie about her life, got destroyed for it. She had to leave Hollywood entirely and work in Europe for years. Eventually she came back and even won another Oscar, proving her talent never went anywhere. But the whole nightmare showed how Hollywood's moral rules only applied to certain people, especially women who wouldn't play by their rules. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was electric. That platinum blonde hair, that laugh, she was magnetic. Everyone wanted to be near her. Behind the glamorous image, though, her life was complicated and sad. Her family was messy and controlling. Then in 1932, her husband Paul Byrne died suddenly. The studio called it suicide, but rumors swirled for decades about what really happened that night. The mystery never got solved. A few years later, Harlow herself died. She was only 26 years old. Kidney failure took her quickly, and the studio was still filming her last movie when she passed. They had to use body doubles and rewrite scenes to finish it without her. The real secret wasn't any particular scandal. It was how the studios manufactured a perfect public image while real tragedy was happening behind the scenes. Fans saw the beautiful, funny star on screen. The people who actually knew her had to deal with loss and unanswered questions that no publicity machine could fix or explain away. Desi Arnaz' I Love Lucy made Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball the most beloved couple on television. Week after week, millions of Americans watched them and believed in their happy marriage. Behind the scenes, the reality was completely different. Arnaz was genuinely brilliant. He basically invented how TV shows were filmed and produced. But he also drank heavily and couldn't stop cheating on Lucy. The marriage everyone thought was perfect was actually falling apart. People who worked on the show remembered getting phone calls at dawn because Arnaz had been partying for 2 days straight without sleep. He could be charming one minute and volatile the next. The drinking and the affairs eventually destroyed their marriage completely. None of this takes away from his genius as a producer and entertainer. He really did change television forever, but it does shatter the illusion that the studio-perfect couple everyone saw on screen actually existed when the camera stopped rolling. The Ricardos were fiction. The real people couldn't make it work. Montgomery Clift. Montgomery Clift changed what a movie star could be. He was sensitive, introspective, and intense in ways that felt completely new and modern. Then, in 1956, he crashed his car, and his face was shattered. After that night, his life became a nightmare of painkillers, alcohol, and paranoia. He kept working, and somehow his performances still had this raw, heartbreaking power. But he was suffering constantly. His friends tried to protect him. The studios didn't know what to do. Sometimes they'd help him. Sometimes they'd abandon him completely. The real secret wasn't about scandal. It was about pain that nobody talked about openly back then. Clift was gay in an era when that could destroy your career, so he had to hide who he was. He was also in chronic physical pain from the accident, but studios kept pushing him to perform and look perfect. The miracle isn't that his career eventually faded. The miracle is that he created performances that still feel almost unbearably honest and real, even now. Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh gave two of the most famous performances in film history, Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind and Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire. She was brilliant, beautiful, and deeply troubled. Leigh suffered from bipolar disorder, which back then people barely understood and treated badly. Being in Hollywood, where every moment of your life was public and photographed, made everything worse. The studio publicists would use soft words like exhaustion or nerves when she had episodes. People who worked with her saw the extreme swings, the dazzling highs, and the devastating lows. Her performances are immortal and perfect on screen, but the personal cost was enormous. In an industry that worships control and demands that stars always be on, Leigh's mental illness made people uncomfortable. She became someone they admired but also feared. It was a reminder that genius and suffering often live together, that the most extraordinary talent can come with the most extraordinary pain. Hollywood didn't know how to handle that truth. George Reeves. George Reeves was Superman to an entire generation of kids. Children looked up to him. Parents trusted him. He was a hero. Then, in 1959, he died from a gunshot wound in his home. The police called it suicide, but almost immediately people started questioning that story. There were theories about jealous lovers, angry mobsters, studio cover-ups. The speculation never stopped, and it still hasn't. Part of the reason nobody could accept the suicide explanation is because of who he represented. How could Superman kill himself? The image was too powerful. The truth might actually be simple and heartbreaking. A man struggling with depression, career frustration, and feeling trapped by a role he couldn't escape. But Hollywood had taught audiences to expect drama, mystery, and neat resolutions. Reeves's death became the story that proves real life doesn't work that way. Sometimes there's no conspiracy. Sometimes mysteries don't get solved no matter how much we want them to. Sometimes even heroes are just struggling people who couldn't find a way forward. Wallace Reed. In the 1910s and early 1920s, Wallace Reed was huge. They called him the screen's perfect lover. He was handsome, athletic, wholesome, everything audiences wanted their movie stars to be. Then, disaster struck. There was a train accident on a movie set, and Reed got hurt. To manage the pain, doctors gave him morphine. Back then, nobody really understood addiction. They just kept giving him the drug. Reed kept working. He kept taking morphine. The addiction got worse and worse, but he hid it, and the studio helped hide it. By 1923, he was dead. He was only 31 years old. After his death, his widow went on tour across America, warning people about the dangers of drugs. The studios hated it. They didn't want anyone connecting Hollywood to addiction and death. When you look at Reed's photographs, he looks healthy, strong, and full of life. But the reality behind those images was a man's body breaking down, dependent on medicine that was slowly killing him, all while trying to maintain the perfect image. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth could dance like magic and light up the screen with just a smile. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but privately, her life was full of pain and control. Her own father had managed her career in ways that were inappropriate and damaging. The studios completely changed her appearance and image to make her marketable. She went through multiple marriages that started as escape attempts and ended as new traps. Later in life, she developed Alzheimer's disease unusually early, but people didn't understand what was happening. Colleagues thought she was being difficult or cold when she couldn't remember things. The misunderstanding was cruel and isolated her. Hayworth once said, "Men go to bed with Gilda and wake up with me." Gilda was her most famous character. That line sounds clever, but it's actually heartbreaking. She was saying that everyone loved the fantasy version of her, but nobody really knew or cared about the real woman. The persona that made her famous also trapped her behind it. She was alone, even when surrounded by people. What binds these stories isn't simply bad behavior or private grief. It's the industrial talent for camouflage. Contracts doubled as handcuffs. Publicists edited reality like a script. Reporters traded silence for scoops. And audiences, eager for the fairy tale, let the credits roll over lives that were still in crisis. The lesson of Hollywood's golden age is not that yesterday's stars were uniquely monstrous or uniquely tragic. It's that the system could package anything: kindness as policy, cruelty as eccentricity, pain as glamour. Pull at any thread and the costume comes off, not just the stars, but the industries.